once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Phil J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
You guys know what to do, just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? I'm Daniel. And today, we're getting back into the Bryan Kohberger case. There's been a lot of pictures that have been dropped here recently. We're not going to get into many of them. We're going to look at just a handful. Basically, I wanted to look at like the knife sheath, and that's it. The rest of the stuff, no way am I going to be bringing any of that on the channel. I think it's disrespectful to the families and things of that nature. But I did want to look at the knife sheath and its position, because there's been quite a bit of a debate that's been going on throughout, I guess, the true crime community. And that was, did Bryan Kohberger leave the knife sheath behind on purpose? Or was that an accident? And up to this point, maybe I've given him a little bit too much credit, but I didn't think that he would have done that. But now looking at the pictures, I don't know. I can't say, 100% that isn't the case. It's odd, the position and where it's at, and, how it's hanging off the bed, the location, of where it was at as well is a question mark. And so we'll get into that, and then we'll discuss the possibilities of why he would not have done it and why he could have done it. As far as leaving the knife sheath behind. Now, obviously, I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that Bryan Kohberger did do this. Now, he's admitted to it. He's taken a plea. He's accepted responsibility for it. And to be 110% honest with you guys, I think those folks that think that he's innocent and that, they would hang out with him and this, that, and the third, if he was out of jail or if he ever got out, I don't think that's the case. I think that he probably looks at some of these pro-burger channels as people who, he probably looks down on him. Like, can you not believe that I could have done this, and et cetera, right? I think he actually wants to take credit for it deep down psychologically. I think he wants to be known as being the Idaho 4 slasher, or whatever you want to call him. But we're going to talk about that today. We're going to get into that discussion. So hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also, if you see the hype button, guys, let's hit the hype button, please. I'd appreciate that. Hit the hype button. That would be great. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, let's talk about why I believe Bryan Kohberger would not have left it on purpose. So, when it came to Bryan Kohberger and trying to piece together the who, what, when, and where, and why, when it came to him, as far as, him committing the crime, when he did it, how he did it, which victim may have been the target, how did he walk, what was the possible walkthrough of the house. And there was a lot of things that I was able to predict with a fair amount of accuracy, because I was able to deduce a lot of information and understand him, I guess, understand what he was doing based on his education and why, right? So he was a PhD student at WSU with a criminology background, for those that aren't aware. And he had written several reports after, prior to transferring from DeSales. He had written a couple of different essays and things of that nature, reports that he submitted in for coursework about investigations and how law enforcement may investigate somebody who has committed a violent crime. In fact, one of the documents that was going to be used at his trial against him was him laying out an investigation against somebody who may have committed a stabbing event against their significant other. And so, with that being said, he had to know, he knew what law enforcement were going to do to investigate him. And he knew what to avoid, so to speak. And so when you look at that long drive he took, per se, right? So he took this long drive. In my opinion, it had more to do with because he understood that law enforcement are going to be looking for a white car. And they're probably going to look for a white car entering other cities during a specific time that they would have believed that the suspect would have traveled through. Now, there's a couple of things that you're probably figuring, when somebody commits a crime like this, is that they're going to be traveling out of there at a high rate of speed. In fact, that's what he was doing. And that they may be trying to get back home as fast as possible because, well, they have a lot of evidence on them, etc. And so law enforcement, what they're going to do is they're going to look at not just Pullman, but Bixby and all the other towns that are around there, Johnson, Idaho, all of them, or Washington, and in the surrounding areas, which included Pullman. And they're going to look at the cameras of vehicles entering those cities at a specific time. Now, they have this vehicle, this white Elantra, that's leaving the area at about 4:20 a.m. And so, you factor in somebody leaving at a high rate of speed, you factor in adrenaline, them going fast. So you factor in that it's probably going to take anywhere between 8 minutes to about 30 minutes of a window that you're going to be looking at the vehicles pulling into Pullman. Now, the reason why you're only looking at that short period of time and you're not sitting somebody there looking at hours upon hours of footage, waiting until 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 something in the morning, when he finally comes back, into play an hour later, is because of resources. At this point, they had utilized a lot of the FBI agents and local law enforcement to take in tips, and they were investigating a lot of things at that time. So because of the lack of resources, not necessarily that they were given, but that they had afforded to them. It's not like they had a unlimited amount of people that were just watching film, taking phone tips and doing the investigation. Right. They had a limited amount, although I would say it was quite a bit. I think at one point it was like 50 or 40 officers or something like that. So it wasn't a small amount, but it still wasn't unlimited. And so Bryan Kohberger understood that. In my opinion, I think that's why he took the drive that he did. One, he went in a direction, in an angle that he was coming into Pullman, that, if law enforcement ever kind of came across that footage, they would have been like, hey, one, it's too late, and two, it's coming in from the wrong direction, so to speak, right? And so, two, it takes too much time. Why would somebody go around doing it that way? He used the knife, which some say that would be something personal, and maybe he was trying to make it appear to be that way. But after looking at the scene, there were some pictures that were dropped. It does seem like this guy had a lot of hatred. He took it all. He took it out, and very gruesome manner. If you don't, there's no need to see those type of images if you don't need to. And so, as I was saying, so he takes this big drive around just to elude the investigation. Now, him traveling back, right? Him driving back to the scene later on that day. That was the last time he actually drove to Moscow. In fact, I think the next day he was connected. I think it was like the 14th or something like that. He was connected to a tower that his phone was connected to a tower that connected to his phone connected to a tower that was in Moscow or serviced Moscow. But they said that they don't believe that he was actually in Moscow. So there was only one time where he kind of returned to the scene. Now, me personally, that's kind of what I was able to deduce. That one piece of information was able to help me deduce that the guy had on either a radio or a phone app, um, and was listening to the radio. Now, I was able to deduce with a fair amount of accuracy, and I put it out there, that I believed he was listening to Broadcastify. I think it was Dylan who made that happen. I think that if he doesn't have that interaction with Dylan as he's walking out, I'm not necessarily certain that Dylan isn't. I'm not necessarily certain that he has the curiosity to go and turn on his phone and listen to the radio dispatch to see if somebody's coming in. Maybe perhaps that was one of the reasons why he left her alive, was because he wanted her to call 911. He wanted to hear the commotion. He wanted to hear what was going on the radio. Now, we found out through documents that Bryan Kohberger had downloaded Broadcastify, which did broadcast the Pullman and Moscow 911 services through Whitcomb 911. And he had downloaded it the night of the murders, just before, or the day of the murders, or the day before, leading up to the murders. And so, to me, I was able to deduce that because he returned. Now, the PCA and evidence, we found out that he never went back after that again. And, that told me a couple of things. One, he knew that they were going to be taking photos and videos of the vehicles that were passing by. And that most likely, if they saw his vehicle passing by the scene, that they could trace it back to him. So he had enough discipline to live 10 miles away and not go back. But yet he went back that morning. Now, some might say, well, Daniel, maybe perhaps because he didn't see it on the news. And for a long time, I thought that as well. But I was like, you know what? He would know this. He would know that just because it's not on the news yet doesn't mean that the scene hasn't been discovered. Doesn't mean that there aren't police officers out there with their dash cams going on their patrol cars, and they're not going to pick up his vehicle passing by. Right? So he has to know that. So for him to have confidence enough to go back to the scene, or to the area of the scene, told me that he must have known that the scene hadn't been discovered. And just because the media isn't there doesn't mean that the scene isn't discovered. That scene could have been discovered as he left. Before he left, is just the media. The scene could have been discovered when he left his apartment. It just, the media may not have gotten to it yet. Or they could have found the scene while he was on the way. As he was there, there are so many things that could have happened, on that short trip, albeit, but still on that trip. And while he was there, or when he got there, that could have, got him on camera or something. And so that told me that he had to have known. He had to have known. He had to have known that they hadn't found the scene, and the only way is through the radio. So, you look at his writings, you look at everything. This guy was, one of the things that he wanted to do was not contaminate a scene when it came to his reports that he wrote for his criminal justice class. Now, leaving something behind screams like something that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't, him leaving something behind says, it goes against all the other things that he did, all the precautions that he made to make sure that the investigation didn't lead to him. Although I will say, taking his phone and turning it on, I do think that was a clue that led to him. But again, I think that just to go full circle here, I think that if Dylan doesn't open that door and he doesn't see Dylan, there's a good possibility that he doesn't turn on his phone till he gets back to Pullman. Right? If he doesn't know that somebody else knows that he committed the crime or that he was inside of the house. And so, which in my opinion, probably does kind of, make the case a little bit more for, for the state against Bryan Kohberger, because, his alibi was going to be that he was out there in Walleye Park or whatever the case would have been. And there's a good possibility that maybe perhaps he was going to go out there if he did turn on his phone or didn't turn on his phone, or if he, his intention wasn't to turn on his phone until he got back into Pullman, then he doesn't really have to. Then it becomes more of an issue, right? Because when his phone comes on, it's just south of Moscow, right? And that's when he turns his phone on. Now, for him to have taken his phone and download the app before he went out there, that also tells me that he had the intention of turning on that phone as soon as he left, regardless. But I do think that Dylan seeing him does make him turn on that phone sooner and listen to the Broadcastify, which ended up, kind of nailing him or helping nail him, so to speak, to the wall. Now, let's see. And so for all those things, that tells me that Bryan Kohberger didn't leave the knife sheath behind, because that would be going against all the other things that he was doing so that he wouldn't get caught. He went to the point of extracting and deleting his phone and all these other things. And so for him to have gone through that, it just doesn't jive with me to say that he left it behind. But, well, then we see a picture of it, and I'm going to bring up a picture of it, guys. Your discretion, you're going to see some blood drops around it, very small. I've tried to edit it out as much as I possibly can. Okay. But let's bring it up. So here's the knife sheath of where it was found. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to make sure I'm going the right direction. It's not. All right. Here it is. So found on the edge of the bed, kind of leaning over the bed. Very visible. Now, I know that there was a blanket over it, and right now what they're trying to do is just, these are some series of pictures of them trying to kind of figure out where it was at, right? The location. This is the size. Now, obviously, we see that the button snap is unbuttoned, and that's where we understand his DNA was left behind. I wonder if he placed the knife in there and unbuttoned the snap somehow in preparation for going in there, and did this before he entered the house in somehow, some way, maybe because he didn't have a mask on or whatever the case may be. But it sounded like it was skin cells. And it sounded like it was a lot of skin cells. So it sounded like he, had opened and closed it a few times. He's probably practicing with it barehanded. And so here's the other thing. So again, I've edited it out. I've cropped it as much as I can because we're not going to look at the other stuff that goes along with it. But look at how close to the top of the bed it is. It's not further down on the bed. And the reason why this kind of bothers me is because this is where he attacked Maddie and Kaylee. This is the area where, because they had all of their injuries to the chest and up, right? And this was the direction I believe that they were laying. Now, perhaps if they were laying the other direction with their heads towards the door, then maybe this makes more sense, right? But based on the pictures of the blood splatter and things of that nature, I don't think that's the case. Plus, it was described that Kaylee had kind of gone into to the corner there and kind of backed into it. That wouldn't have happened if their heads were facing the other direction towards the door. That would only happen if their heads were facing towards the wall. And so the knife sheath is relatively close to the head of the bed. And it's just slightly hanging off the bed, sticking out. And this is where it is with the comforter that was on top of it. It almost seems like it was slid underneath the comforter. I'm having a hard time figuring this out of how this knife sheath got under the comforter like this if the knife sheath was placed on top. Hey, what's going on? Real Mikey in the house. Thank you so much for gifting one Drunk Turkey Show membership. So let's see. Thank you, Mikey. Appreciate you, my man. But this here looks very much like it was slid in there. Now, could he have, taken the knife out and then slid the knife sheath there so that way it stayed there? Because, so that way it wouldn't fall off the bed so he can get it after he was done doing his attack. And he just forgot because most likely, he heard Xana and Murphy coming up the stairs. Quite possible. It's possible. But if he did that and then got on top of the bed and then committed these crimes, I'm struggling with it just staying there. Could the girls have grabbed it in a struggle? I mean, they could have, but there's not a lot of blood on it, if any. And Christy, you're right. It could have moved when they moved the comforter. It was underneath the comforter partially. It was described in this manner, partially underneath the blanket and underneath Mogen's body. So as you can see, it's just hanging off the edge here. Hanging off the edge. Almost in a situation that, in a scenario that, I mean, any further it'd fall off. Okay. All right. Give me a second. Sorry about that. My phone's falling over. So, and here it is. It was opened, and the open part prevented it from going further onto the bed. And so, let me see. I think that might be the last one I have. Yep. So it was open when it was found already off the edge of the bed. It looks like it's almost pressed up against the bed. So kind of like if he slid it there to the point where it stopped because of the button snap. So to me, this feels very much like it was placed there. The problem with it for me is that it stayed there after he attacked two people on that part of the bed. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, guys. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to put a poll real quick. I want to know what you guys think. And it's probably going to be on the larger channel. I know it's going on two places. Guys, let's see which one is the one with, there it is. All right, so I'm gonna put a poll in here. Was it left? Was the sheath left on purpose? I want to know what you guys think. Yes or no? And that's going to be the only two things, is yes or no. So I have that going. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Now, so this got me thinking, like, all right, would Bryan Kohberger, or could Bryan Kohberger have left this knife sheath on purpose? What is the evidence? What, based off of everything that I said beforehand about why I believed he wouldn't, what could we come up with? And we can come up with this. One, he's not perfect. Two, he's a bit of a narcissist, so he thinks he can outsmart everybody. In my opinion, I think he did think he outsmarted everybody. That's why he was looking for a replacement, knife sheath. And I've said this a few times, but I find it very odd that he stops looking for a replacement knife sheath after the white Elantra Bolo comes out. So up until that point, he's looking for a knife sheath. Now, why would he stop? You know, if you're arguing that he's looking on there because he you know, he wants a replacement in case somebody comes a knocking, wouldn't that be the time to do it? You know, people are, you know, they're looking for the wide Elantra. Wouldn't that be the moment that you say, "Hey, I need to replace this," not the moment that you stop looking for it? And then he had pictures and images of other women, some that went to his college, some that went to the University of Idaho. Um, and so I personally think that he was gearing up to do it again. And then when the white bolo or the bolo for the white Elantra comes out, he not only freaks out, he freaks out on his professor, and he ends up getting fired. Now, that's what leads up to his termination, is what happens shortly after. And I strongly suspect that his plan initially was for him to fly back home. But once the Elantra came out, you know, as a bolo, well, he couldn't leave his car behind anymore, right? And so because he couldn't leave his car back behind and come, you know, and he's created this situation with the school, he somehow talks his dad into buying a plane ticket, fly cross country, and take him back home. Now, why do I believe that? It's because we found the plane ticket, you know, and we found out that the plane ticket was bought December 10th to fly out December 11th. And when he purchased that ticket, he also bought another plane ticket to go from Pullman back to Pennsylvania in January, on January 20th. So we know that Bryan Kohberger was eventually planning on going back to Washington, possibly without the white Elantra. I think he was going to try to sell it out there in Pennsylvania cross country. But you know, his plan was eventually to go back to Washington, and his dad was going to drive across country with him in late January and then fly back to Pennsylvania. So we found that, you know, if he was willing to buy a plane ticket in January, on January 20th, you know, that sounds like a person who wants to, you know, plan ahead, so to speak. So when he's buying a plane ticket to go from the 10th to 11th, you know, to get out of there as fast as possible right after the bolo comes out, I think that's a pretty big red flag, right? We also noticed that he has this wind deflector on his hood of his car. You know, that wind deflector wasn't there when he changed his license plates, right? Because we have images, you know, Dateline dropped images where he took a picture of him putting on his Washington license plates on his Elantra on November, I think 18th, and that wind diffuser isn't there, the one on the hood. So he tried to make his vehicle look different than what was seen on the cameras. So that way they would assume it wasn't him. You know, but again, he's not smart. You know, he's smart, but he's not perfect, right? He turned his phone on, so he was susceptible to, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, curiosity killing the cat. Now, if this is a guy also that committed a quadruple homicide, he's not all wired there, right? You know what I mean? So even though he got so many things right, you know, could he have gotten something wrong or done something wrong because he thought he was smarter than everybody? You know, who was he trying to, you know, idolize? You know, there was a lot of Ted Bundy. You know, I looked at, you know, some of the things that he was saying. He had zero, you know, authentic ideas of his own. He copied everybody on everything. And for a while, even on his Tappa Talk, you know, I was able to say that this guy was a guy that idolized Patrick Bateman from the movie American Psycho, strictly based on what he was saying on Tappa Talk, because it was almost identical to the montage or the monologue that Patrick Bateman says in the beginning and also throughout portions of the movie, where he talks about himself being, you know, you know, having no emotion, feeling nothing for anybody, you know, seeing other people, but they're nothing. And then you listen to Kohberger saying, I have a mask, I don't feel anything. You know, I should feel this way, but I don't. People are organic sacks of meat, including myself, yada, yada, yada. This is almost verbatim, right? And then you got the birthing hips comment. I told you guys that was from a movie, you know, Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp, right? I told you guys that was from that movie. So again, no thought in his mind. And so when he sees like BTK, when he sees, you know, the Zodiac Killer or some of these other guys who had taunted mainstream media or law enforcement, you know, did he think that he could do something and put it out there and they not figure it out? Could he put out a code like K-bar and nobody figure out that in some form or fashion that is in his own mind, that was some sort of resemblance of Bryan Kohberger backwards of some sort in some weird way. K-bar Bryan Kohberger. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised. And, looking at the knife sheath and the way it's positioned, I think it is possible that he may have left it behind. It may have been a calling card that we don't know about. Because because he was smart enough to elude certain parts of the investigation doesn't mean that he wasn't dumb enough to do some other dumb things. We already know he did. That's what got him caught. A lot of people that defend him, say the same thing over and over again. Like, why would he take his car? Why would he take his phone? Why would he do this? Why would he do that? Why would he leave the knife sheath behind? I'm like, man, he did all these things and you're surprised that he got caught? You keep saying, why would he do this? Why would he do that? Why are you surprised he got caught after he did all that? You know what I'm saying? So it's a scenario where, is he that stupid to have left this behind as some sort of calling card, as some sort of riddle that nobody was going to understand or get? The other thing that he did is he apparently carved something into Ethan's legs, or into one of his leg. I don't know. That's from Dateline. I have no idea what that means, or if there was something more there. Zero idea. I did see one image where it did look like something was written in blood, but I mean, it could have been, you can't see anything. It just looks like fingers. And, it could have been just something from the struggle, but he did a lot of stupid things. He did a lot of stupid stuff. He, in my opinion, perhaps was focusing too much on the bigger picture of certain things that were going to get him caught, of these things that got everybody else caught. This guy, this guy's search history, this guy's this guy's that maybe perhaps he overlooked some of the smaller things, and at the end of the day, he made a lot of mistakes, and good, because I didn't have a lot of faith in that prosecution towards the end. Not saying that I didn't have faith against the evidence. I think the evidence is very strong. And I think that with the right person presenting the evidence, it would have been a slam dunk case. I feared that the prosecution wasn't going to be strong enough to have presented a strong enough case that was going to convince a jury. Just kind of the way they were arguing certain things and what they were saying, it just, didn't sit well. So I'm glad he took a plea deal at this point. Let's see. Tim Collins, what's going on, Tim? Tim says he eventually did wipe the sheath, which is what they got single source sample of DNA. Yeah, he definitely may have. I think he was playing with it, to be honest with you, opening it and closing it, opening and closing it. And I think that's how he ended up getting some of his skin cells underneath there. Without the DNA on the snap, he probably wouldn't have been caught. That's a good point, Kim. Let's see. Now, to me, I'm not saying that that's not true. I think that if he didn't leave, if they didn't find DNA on the snap, right? Let's just say they found no DNA on it. Yeah, I think it was going to be tough to get a conviction. I think they would have figured out that it was Bryan Kohberger. Here's why. Now, WSU right now, let me take this off the screen. So WSU right now is fixing to get sued, right? They're going through a whole lawsuit with some of the victims' family members, or the family members of the victims. And because they believe that it could have been, prevented, some of the signs were there very early on, and they could have done something. Now, I agree with them. I think there was a lot of signs there. More so, my agreement on anything is that I think that they probably should have been aware of Bryan Kohberger a lot sooner, and they should have given that information to law enforcement. The current, WSU chief police, Jennings, I think is his name. He used to be the he used to be the Pullman police chief. And he was the point of contact between the Moscow City Police Chief, Fry, and the seniors, not seniors as in the classmates, the senior leads, the head of WSU. So it's a committee. There's a dean, but it's not just the dean that makes their decisions. This was all off of a couple of different interviews that the chief had done, and he was in contact with those senior leads. He was the person who was referencing whether or not, what information they could about the Moscow murders, right? So he had talked to them about, now these people, I'm assuming that if they're going to terminate somebody and take away, and I'm talking about Bryan Kohberger, if WSU is going to terminate Bryan Kohberger and take away his funding and things of that nature, John Snyder had said in an interview on, I think it was on the New York Post, that he was somewhat against the firing and the termination, that they felt that they were going to get a lawsuit in their hands because, when you promise somebody, et cetera, whatever. He was hesitant about the whole termination thing. And then another person said that this was the first and only person that they're aware of that WSU has terminated funding and all that other stuff. And so don't you think that a decision like that is coming from the senior leads? Right now, here's the other kicker. So Gary Jenkins, I think is his name, or Jennings, one of the two. He is the person who decided not to hire Bryan Kohberger as an intern police officer. So that's his decision. He chooses not to do so. He says because he wasn't a people person, whatever. Now, in another interview, he is asked about Bryan Kohberger, and he said that the only thing that he was aware of is that he had heard about some of the things that, he had a lack of personal space and stuff like that. So to me, I was like, all right, well, this is the guy who, spoke with Bryan Kohberger, interviewed him because Bryan Kohberger emailed him, and they talked about their conversation together about the intern position. Why would a chief of police know about something that is not a criminal event with Bryan Kohberger just, blocking somebody from walking out? It's not a serious enough a thing for it to become a criminal complaint, yet he's aware of it. So that doesn't make sense unless it was part of his investigation into Bryan Kohberger. Because I found out, hey, I looked it up. I went to the Pullman Police Department website, and if you're going to be an intern police officer, guess what happens? You got to go through a background check. I wonder who was doing Bryan Kohberger's background check. If it was that same chief of police who had interviewed him, who was aware of some of the things that Bryan Kohberger was doing before his arrest, because they'd asked him, did you know him? Were you aware of any of the issues that he was having at WSU? And he said he was aware of some of those things. So he was aware of that. So this was the guy investigating Bryan Kohberger as far as the intern police position, talking to the chief of police and talking to the same senior leads of WSU who were having problems with Bryan Kohberger that he was doing a background check on. And they were having all these problems to the point where they were terminating him. So you can't tell me that they weren't at least concerned, worried that one of their students may have been this guy with all these red flags and everything else. My opinion, I think they sat on it. They were like, let's hope it doesn't get there. We're not going to say anything because, man, how bad would that look? And if we're wrong, if this guy gets investigated, they find out his name, social media is going to find out who he is. They're going to take, we're going to be getting sued by Mr. Kohberger. That's my opinion. I think that's how it went down. I just don't see, unless you're just that bad of an investigator, Mr. Chief of Police over there, that you can't put two and two together, that you have this guy that happens to drive a white Elantra who is in PhD program. Well, maybe not that part should bug you, but the part about the complaints and the amount of complaints and where the complaints were coming from, they're coming from women. The type of complaints that were happening. So you have all this stuff going on, and yet you don't know. You don't bring it up to Moscow saying, hey, we got this troublesome guy out here, drives a white Elantra. You might want to just look at him. especially when you get the bolo coming out. I mean, maybe, somebody saying, well, maybe they didn't know he drove a white Elantra. I don't know, maybe. Maybe. I mean, they were also the ones that found it, put it in the, now I know it wasn't the chief there that went out there and found it, but they were aware to a certain extent. The department was. And again, maybe you're just bad at doing your job and somebody just skated right under your nose with all this problems and all this stuff that you're investigating to the point where you decide not to hire him. Right? Because he goes out there to try to say, hey, I didn't hire him because he was not a people person. I mean, do you really even have to say that, to be honest with you? Could you have just said, hey, we didn't hire him because we found a better applicant? No. They give this bullcrap reason. To me, that screams, if you're giving a bullcrap reason like that, like, oh, he's just not a people person, that's why we didn't hire him. It's like you're trying to say, you're trying to avoid the fact that you were aware of the problems. In my opinion, that's what you're doing. In my opinion, you are trying to avoid knowledge, because then what are you scared you're going to get sued? I hope you do. I hope that department does, and I hope that school does. Because I think Bryan Kohberger could have gotten caught a lot earlier, and he didn't have to wait for STR and S&P profiles and all this other stuff to go through. But just good old-fashioned police work, if they would have given the information that they had about the troublesome guy that they were about to fire, they would have just handed that information like, hey, we have this troublesome guy that we're about to fire who has a lot of weird complaints against women, to the point where teachers were reporting that they were fear that he was going to become a predator. And you don't report that over. You don't say anything. You don't say you have this problem with this guy. I mean, it wouldn't have been hard for law enforcement to say, all right, we'll look into him. What does he drive? Oh, he drives a white Elantra. Interesting. All right, what's his name? All right, let's look up to see if he's ever been pulled over with us. Oh, he has. Oh, shoot, here's his cell phone number. Why don't we check, the advanced timing records and everything else to see if his phone was in the area? Oh, his phone's not showing up here. It's not showing up in Pullman either. It must have been off. Let's get a warrant to see what he was doing specifically with his phone. Oh, look at that. Would you just check that out? His phone goes off at 2:47 in the morning, doesn't come back on until 5 or 4:48, after the murders. And look at where he's at, just south of Moscow. Let's go follow him and see if we can get some of his DNA. Since this person left the knife sheath behind, we got some DNA that we can compare it to. And guess what? He's wearing gloves and a bunch of other stuff. We can't get his DNA. All right, what's the next best thing to do? All right, well, let's go to his parents' house. Let's pick up their DNA. Because if we can get a familial or paternal or a maternal hit on here from his family, that'll give us a warrant to swab his ass, or his mouth, actually. You get a warrant to swab him, and then you got him. He's gonna match, what was it, 1 to 8 octillion chance it was somebody else. And then you got your guy. You don't have to ever worry about no family tree or genetic tree or any of those things. If all they did was just shed a little bit of light in that direction, that case would have gone running, and they could have solved that thing so fast. And these were problems that they were having right around the times that the murders were happening. How do they not connect those dots? How do they not? Let's see. So I'll be answering a couple questions. I'll do this for the next 5-10 minutes, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. Let me see what the poll says. So I'm going to end the poll. Was the sheath left on purpose? Let's pull that up. I ended it. I don't know where it went. But it was like 60% or a little bit over 60% said that the sheath. Oh, we got another Drunk Turkey Show membership I need to speak about. We We got Midwest coming in with a Drunk Turkey Show membership. And we also got Midwest with their membership. Thank you so much. You guys rock. I appreciate you guys. And so a lot of you guys think that no, it was not left on purpose. I tend to side with you guys. You know, I still think it wasn't. I do think it's just kind of weird where it was at, though. I'll be honest with you. I think it's weird where it was at. But let me see. I got one more photo I want to show you guys. And it's the shoe print. So this was the cross tread. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if you're going to be able to determine how wide of a shoe that is, if that's actually Vans or not. That's going to be tough. That would be tough. Ollie says, I think they were aware and didn't take it seriously. I think that's possible. The college is liable and the lawsuit is warranted. I agree. I agree. You know, I'm not going to say that they didn't act or they didn't do things fast enough. They got rid of the guy. They fired him right away. I just think that they withheld information that probably could have gotten him caught a lot sooner. I mean, if they're able to catch him without having to do the whole IGG, and I mean, that's just something that all these Kohbergers wouldn't have had to try to utilize as some sort of, I don't know. They were trying to make it into something they didn't. Well, one, most of them don't understand or know what it is. And they were like, oh, the IgG doubled up, or the DNA did this, or the DNA did that, STR, SNP. And, you know, might as well have been singing the ABCs. They didn't know shit about it. They were just throwing things back and forth and pretending to know or pretending that they knew something. And they didn't. And so, you know, at the end of the day, if they would have been able to have gotten him without it, I mean, this case would have been extremely solid because that's what they had, you know, on him for the most part, right? That's what they had on him. Let's see. That's what they had on. All righty, guys. Answer some of your questions. Xana probably interrupted him from the satisfaction phase and Maddie and Kaylee. He wasn't thinking about that sheet. It's a good possibility. It's a good possibility. You know, like I said, I've said it multiple times. I thought that he definitely got surprised, you know, and let's see. I definitely think he got surprised. I'm sorry about this, guys. I'm just checking on some. Would you think that they would communicate? Wouldn't you think that they would communicate? I would have thought so. But the chief of police there in Moscow was trying to keep a lot of things to themselves. Hey, what's going on, Chloe? How's it going? Hey, Steelers fan building. We got Kel as well. There was a lot of signs. Hey, Heather, how's it going? If I didn't catch everybody in before, I apologize. I'm just now getting into the live chat. Chloe thinks that we're going to get a response from WSU. I hope so. Let's see what they say. Want to see what they say. It's all about the money. I agree. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Yeah, so hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell. As a professor myself, the politics to protect people is hard, but more and more, there is zero tolerance policy. I've seen a change in the last 5 years. That's good to know. That's good to know. Because it was bad. What's going on, Artwork, coming in with a membership for 20 months. Good to see you, my man. Good to see you. I did say that. Do you think the recent you redacted photos and docs are somehow being leaked via legitimate source as they disappeared almost immediately. Thank you. I think that these guys leaked out a lot of pictures, and some of them may have had some images that they shouldn't have had. I unfortunately had one sent to me. Not saying that the person that sent it to me was unfortunate. I had one sent to me, and it was unfortunate that you could see Xana in the photo, and she wasn't blacked out. And so it was sent to me, and they said, "Hey, this was in there. This was one of the ones that may have been taken down because a few of them were taken down." And so it sounds like they put up pictures they weren't supposed to. And I think that's why there are so many that were taken down. Let's see. Yep. They came from ISP. ISP took them down when the families and others complained. Yeah. It was ugly. I saw a few of them. I didn't see all of them. I saw a few of them, and you can, it's bad. You know, I feel bad for all of them. All of them. They absolutely went through a horrific ordeal with an ugly ass monster. Does PK kid visitors his family? I'm sure he can, you know, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he does. If they go because of the distance, right? Tim says the sheath placement seems to point to being surprised. It could be. You know, to me, it just feels like he slid it there, though. But maybe he just slid it there, attacked, was intending to slide it back out, and just forgot. It's a good possibility. Good possibility. Let me know in the live chat. If you're watching this on the replay, let me know in the comment section. What do you guys think? Do you guys, you know, where you guys at? I know the live chat, they think it's been, it's not there. The Goncalves ladies are going to address some of the questions and dispel some rumors. Chrissy said she probably Monday on TikTok. I think that would be nice if we went and supported them 100%. And thank you for being here, Mama. Good to see you. Felt like it was such an invasion of privacy. Just sat around. Yeah, it was very sad. I couldn't imagine, you know, seeing or you know, and I don't understand why people want to see this stuff, you know. You know, I know there's some folks that like seeing crime scenes and crime scene photos of different, you know, things. You know, to each is their own. It's not for me, you know, but to each is their own. All righty, guys. Well, I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. I got Artworks, we got Midwest, and we got Real Mikey. I want to say thank you guys again for supporting the show and this channel and being mods. You guys are amazing. I'll be back tomorrow night, guys. I think we're going to do a football show. So if you're into the football stuff, we'll be back tomorrow. And then the true crime will hit back up on Saturday. Also, guys, if you guys haven't noticed, I've been dropping some other type of content here recently. I've been doing some Pokemon stuff. My buddies, Jaime, you guys remember Jaime. My buddy Hugo and Jonathan, they've been collecting and a bunch of sort of stuff. They've collected all sorts of things, and Pokemon is one of them. And I've never collected anything outside of cars. Cars have been my thing. I've had a lot of different cars. I've had everything from a 350 GT, a Shelby GT 350. Sorry about that. I've had a SRT Hellcat Challenger. I had the M6 BMW. I had a LC 500, a 1953 Bel Air hardtop. Right now, I got a 3000 GT VR4, all-wheel drive twin turbo that I'm working on building. That's my baby right now. You know, I've had so many cars, so many Camaros, Trans Ams, a WS6. So I've done a bunch of the whole cars thing. But my buddies got me into these Pokemon cards, and so I've been dropping some videos here and there. If you guys are into it, or if you have like kids or whatnot, and you know, friends that are into it, please share that type of content with them as well. I want to do it with my little one. You know, you guys remember Rogie? She's about to be 3 now here in the next few months, and you know, I took it to her first card show here recently. We had a good time, you know, walking around and stuff. She don't understand anything yet, obviously, but you know, I think she had a good time seeing everybody in the crowd. But I hope that that's something that we can do together, me and her. And so, if you guys want to, you know, support that journey, it's not going to be on any of the live shows. all my live shows are going to be strictly true crime and football and missing persons and things of that nature. Me ripping up cards and stuff like that, packs. That's going to be just recorded content. So if you want to stick just to the true crime stuff, then I'll be going live 3 times a week on true crime stuff. And so you'll still catch me doing that. But if you want to catch those other episodes or shows, they come out sporadically. So like, comment, subscribe. You guys know what to do. Well, I'll see you guys next time. Hey, what's going on, Jeff? Good to see you. I'll see you guys next time. Let's see. Those will be core memories, and she'll be loved. Oh, I hope so. That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, it's something that like my buddy he does with his son, and I see a lot of folks doing it with their kids, and I want to have that extra bonding connection with my little girl. And we're into sports, or I'm trying to get her into sports and gymnastics and things, but doing something that we both can do would be awesome. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, guys. I'll be back tomorrow night and see you guys then. Until then, peace out. See y'all later.